Ridley Scott's Alien is a seminal work in both science fiction and horror, blending the genres into a singular terrifying experience. While Scott has stated that he did not set out to make a film with an explicit message, Alien is deeply reflective of the anxieties of the late 1970s, a time of corporate distrust, post Vietnam paranoia, and shifting gender dynamics. By analyzing its cinematic techniques and thematic content, we can uncover the deeper cultural significance of Alien beyond its visceral horror. One of the most striking elements of Alien is its depiction of corporate exploitation. The crew of the Nostromo are not elite astronauts, but what came to be known as space truckers, blue collar workers hauling cargo across the galaxy. Their conversations about pay bonuses and company protocol make it clear that they are not valued individuals, but expendable employees.
Right. Brett and I, we think we deserve full shares, right, baby?
You see, Mr. Park and I feel that the bonus situation has never been on an equitable level.
Well, you get what you contracted for, like everybody else.
Yes, but everybody else gets more than us.
Wayland Yutani, the faceless corporation that employs them, is indifferent to their survival. The company's secret directive, as revealed by the onboard AI Mother, simply states crew expendable, a stark reminder of how workers were often sacrificed for corporate gain. This reflects the growing distrust of corporations in the 1970s, a decade that was marked by economic downturns, rising unemployment, and the perception that large businesses prioritize profit over people. Even such as the 1973 oil crisis and the stagflation that followed made many workers feel vulnerable to the whims of multinational corporations.
like rationing and an industry shutting down, unable to turn a profit.
But you will go up when you get the word.
Yes, sir, I definitely will.
Alien taps into this fear by presenting Wayland Yutani as an all-powerful entity, one that views human lives as mere collateral in the pursuit of scientific and military advancement. The industrial, brutalist design of the Nostromo further emphasizes this theme. The ship is not a sleek, futuristic vessel, but a dirty, mechanical construct, more of a floating factory than a spacefaring utopia. This utilitarian aesthetic reinforces the idea that the crew are not explorers but laborers, toiling away in a dangerous environment where their lives are secondary to the company's ambitions.
Son of a bitch.
What's the matter?
The late 1970s marked a period of global uncertainty. The Vietnam War had ended in 1975, but its aftershocks were still felt, particularly in how it shaped public perception of warfare and authority. The war exposed the horrors of guerrilla tactics, an enemy that did not play by conventional rules, striking from the shadows and vanishing before retaliation was possible. Alien taps into this fear through the xenomorph, a perfect killing machine that operates on stealth and ambush tactics, much like the unpredictable nature of guerrilla warfare. The Nostromo's crew is ill equipped for this kind of battle. They are not soldiers, but working class laborers, forced into an unwinnable confrontation with an entity they do not understand. The film's pacing enhances this dread with long stretches of eerie quiet, punctuated by sudden violent encounters. And in this next scene, notice how the quietness contrasts with the buildup of loud sounds. The sudden silence is punctuated by soft jingling of chains, almost like wind chimes. Much like the Vietnam War, where US forces were unable to predict when or where their enemy would strike, Alien keeps its horror lurking in the unknown, weaponizing uncertainty and fear. The Cold War context also plays a significant role. With detente between the US and the Soviet Union collapsing, and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in December of 1979 signaling a return to hostilities, the fear of an uncontrollable, escalating conflict permeated global politics. The xenomorph, much like nuclear annihilation, is an unstoppable force. Once unleashed, it spreads death indiscriminately. This sense of doom is underscored by the crew's growing realization that they have no true power to stop what is happening. Their deaths are inevitable, much like the fear of an impending Cold War disaster. Technophobia also plays a crucial role in Alien, particularly in the character of Ash, the android who is secretly working for Wayland Yutani. Ash is a perfect embodiment of corporate and technological mistrust, an artificial intelligence created to serve the company's interest at the expense of human lives. Unlike HAL 9000 from 2001: A Space Odyssey, who malfunctions due to conflicting orders, Ash is operating exactly as he was designed, to be an efficient, emotionless enforcer of corporate policy. His cold, detached nature and eventual breakdown reveal a deep-seated fear of machines surpassing human control. The fact that the crew is unaware of Ash's true nature until it's too late reinforces the paranoia of technology being secretly embedded in human systems, working against humanity rather than for it. If Alien feels different from other horror or sci-fi films, that's because it's structured in a way that isn't traditional. It doesn't rush into action, it doesn't constantly throw scares at you, and it doesn't even follow a typical three-act structure in the way most Hollywood films do. Instead, it's paced like a slow-burning nightmare, starting with uneasy quiet, building tension piece by piece, then slamming into terror and chaos when it's too late to stop it. The film can be broken down into four distinct movements rather than the standard three acts. Each one serves a different purpose in the story, and more importantly, in how Alien manipulates the audience's expectations. Most horror films establish their threat early on. Alien does the opposite. It spends almost a full 30 minutes just letting us sit in this world. We meet the crew, we see their working class dynamic, and we get used to the cold, industrial environment of the Nostromo. There's no immediate danger, no sense of urgency, but that's the trick. This section is lulling us into a false sense of security. Scott structures this opening like a slow reveal, much like the xenomorph itself. The film gives us hints of something wrong. Mother intercepting a distress signal, Kane's curiosity about the eggs, but nothing outright happens yet. The pacing is intentionally slow, forcing us to wait. The structure here mirrors the fear of the unknown. Something is coming, but we don't know what or when. And then, impact moment number one, the facehugger. Once Kane is back on the ship, the second movement begins. The horror has entered the safe space, but the characters don't realize it yet. And what does Scott do? He makes us wait again. He doesn't rush into the horror. Instead, he gives us another period of calm. Kane wakes up. Everything seems fine. The crew sits down for a meal. The structure is essential to how the horror works. If the facehugger attack was immediately followed by another violent scene, we'd adjust to the rhythm. Instead, Scott resets the tension, making us think maybe things are fine now. And then the structure snaps. There's no slow build up here, no eerie music cue. It just happens. Fast. It's chaos. The movie tears away the safety net we've had so far. From here on, the pacing shifts. The slow burn is over. Now, one by one, the crew members are taken out. This is where Scott fully leans into slasher horror structure. The xenomorph doesn't attack in swarms, it hunts. We get individual prolonged death scenes, each one playing with suspense in a different way. Notice how Scott changes the rhythm here. The movie moves between loud, chaotic movements and long, quiet stretches. The pacing doesn't let us settle. Sometimes the alien strikes in seconds, while other times it toys with its victims, dragging the moment out. The cinematography plays a massive role in this section. Notice how the camera starts moving more like the alien. Low angles, slow pans, often from behind objects like it's watching. This subtly shifts our perspective. We stop seeing things as the crew does and start seeing them as prey. At this point, the horror has escalated into full survival mode. The ship is self-destructing and Ripley is running for her life. But Scott plays with one last structural trick. He lets us think it's over. We've seen this ending before in other movies. The final girl survives. The threat is gone. She can rest. And Scott makes us believe it. The music even softens, but structurally, there's still one last act left. Scott breaks the familiar horror structure. This isn't the hero's triumphant escape. This is one last nightmare, waiting in the dark. Ripley isn't in control. She isn't even aware. For almost a full minute, the film just lets us sit with it, the alien, right there in total silence. This is pure cinematic horror. No music, no chase, just realization. Only here, at the very end, does Ripley finally take control. She doesn't just survive, she destroys the horror, making sure it can't come back. The final structural choice ensures that the film doesn't end with helplessness, but with Ripley reclaiming power. Most horror films follow a predictable three-act structure: setup, confrontation, resolution. Alien doesn't. It stretches tension longer than expected, breaks up its pacing with false security, and ends with one final scare when we least expect it. It's not just a monster movie, it's a carefully structured descent into fear, designed to keep us on edge the entire time. And that's why Alien still works, decades later. It doesn't just scare us, it traps us. Ridley Scott masterfully uses cinematography to enhance Alien's atmosphere of claustrophobia and tension. The Nostromo's interior is a labyrinth of narrow corridors, filled with shadowy corners and low hanging machinery that obstruct visibility. This design forces the viewer into a sense of confinement, making escape feel impossible. One particularly effective example is the use of extreme close ups during moments of tension. When Brett searches for Jonesy, the cat, the camera lingers on beads of sweat forming on his face, heightening our awareness of his fear. The sound design reinforces this anxiety. The rhythmic hum of the ship's machinery builds an oppressive soundscape that keeps the audience on edge. Scott also employs the technique of negative space to great effect. The film often frames characters in such a way that large portions of the screen are left dark or empty, forcing the audience to anxiously anticipate the xenomorph's emergence. This visual tension mirrors the broader themes of the film: the unknown terror that lurks just out of sight, whether it be a corporate betrayal, a Cold War threat, or an unstoppable alien predator. The production design of the Nostromo reflects industrial brutalism and corporate coldness. The ship's interiors are cramped and dimly lit, evoking the oppressive conditions of a factory or industrial complex rather than an advanced space vessel. Externally, the ship's bulky, utilitarian structure lacks the sleekness of other sci fi spacecraft, reinforcing the idea that it is designed purely for function, rather than comfort or grandeur. This stark mechanical setting enhances the film's themes of corporate indifference and the insignificance of the crew in the grander scheme of Wayland Yutani's ambitions. The sound design of Alien plays a crucial role in heightening the suspense. The frequent use of silence creates an unsettling atmosphere, making every small noise, footstep, the hiss of steam, or the distant hum of machinery feel ominous. Sudden bursts of sound, such as alarms blaring or the alien's shrieks, are used sparingly but effectively, ensuring that moments of terror hit with full force.
3 minutes.
The film's auditory landscape mirrors its themes of isolation and helplessness, making the viewer feel just as trapped as the crew. The 1970s saw a rise in second wave feminism, challenging traditional gender roles and advocating for workplace equality, reproductive rights, and greater representation in media. Alien subverts many of the gendered expectations of horror and science fiction. Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver, is a rare protagonist for the era, a competent, intelligent, and authoritative woman who is not sexualized or infantilized. Unlike many female characters in horror, Ripley does not scream helplessly or rely on a male savior. Instead, she is pragmatic and resourceful, ultimately outsmarting both the alien and the corporation that sought to use it. Her survival feels earned, not incidental. The film also challenges traditional notions of male dominance through Kane's impregnation. The facehugger forcibly inseminates him, and he is later subject to a violent, involuntary birth via the chestburster. This reversal of traditional gender roles forces male viewers to confront a horror that was, at the time, almost exclusively associated with women: the loss of bodily autonomy and the trauma of childbirth. Moreover, the backlash against feminism in the late 1970s, led by figures like Phyllis Schlafly, sought to reinforce traditional gender roles. Alien flies in the face of this movement, presenting a world where a woman can be the most competent leader, and where the horrors of violation and reproduction are inflicted upon men. Few cinematic creatures embody the concept of biomechanical horror as effectively as Alien's xenomorph. The alien's grotesque fusion of organic and mechanical elements is a direct product of H.R. Geiger's surreal, nightmarish artwork, which often explored themes of sexual horror, bodily violation, and the unsettling marriage of flesh and machine. The xenomorph is both eerily organic and disturbingly artificial. Its skeletal exoskeleton and biomechanical tubing make it look like an unnatural perversion of evolution. This unsettling aesthetic plays into deep-seated anxieties about bodily autonomy, technological corruption, and the loss of humanity in the face of the unknown. Geiger's influence extends beyond just the alien itself. The facehugger sequence remains one of the most viscerally disturbing moments in cinematic history, tapping into fears of forced impregnation and parasitism. The facehugger forcibly attaches itself to Kane, implanting an embryo while leaving him powerless to resist. The invasive, phallic design of the creature, combined with the horrific birth of the chestburster, inverts traditional horror narratives here. It is a male birth character who experiences the violation of his body, suffering an excruciating and involuntary birth. This moment embodies one of Alien's most subversive themes: the ultimate horror of reproduction when it is divorced from control, consent, or autonomy. The fear of bodily invasion extends beyond the alien itself as well, manifesting in the very environment of the derelict ship where the crew first encounters the xenomorph's eggs. The ship, like the alien, is neither entirely mechanical nor entirely organic. Its walls are ribbed and sinewy, almost resembling the internal structure of a living organism, or even bone. The space jockey, the fossilized pilot of the ship, appears to be fused with his chair, further blurring the line between biology and technology. This unsettling fusion suggests a terrifying possibility: that the alien's reproductive and evolutionary process might not just be limited to organic hosts, but that it could assimilate, transform, or overtake anything it encounters, including machines and spaceships. This aesthetic choice reflects broader anxieties about the increasing integration of technology into human life, and the fear that machinery could one day become indistinguishable from organic life. The final act of the film reinforces this thematic horror, particularly in the scene where Ripley descends into the alien's nest. As she ventures deeper into the ship, she enters a nightmarish space where the Nostromo's sterile industrial design is slowly overtaken by the alien's biomechanical growth. This transformation is visually striking. One side of the screen is bathed in the cold, metallic structures of the Nostromo, while the other is a grotesque web of alien-like tendrils and egg sacs pulsating with eerie life. The scene reaches its chilling peak when Ripley finds Dallas cocooned, but still alive, irreversibly consumed by the alien's reproductive cycle. The lighting of this scene is particularly important. It visually reinforces the battle between human civilization and the encroaching horror of the alien, between cold technology and grotesque, inhuman evolution. Ripley's destruction of the nest is not just an act of survival. It is an attempt to reclaim control over an environment that has been irreversibly corrupted by an organism that turns the human body into raw material for its reproductive cycle. Originally, Ridley Scott omitted these scenes from the theatrical cut for the sake of maintaining pacing and narrative urgency. At this point, Ripley is running out of time. She's meant to be escaping considering the ship is about to self-destruct. Leaving this scene out also leaves the nature of the xenomorph's life cycle a mystery. Despite its removal, the scene still evokes fears of biomechanical takeover through the suggestion that the Nostromo is no longer just a failing ship, but a vessel in the process of being transformed, overtaken by an organism that thrives through corruption and assimilation. Even without the nest scene, the final moments of Ripley's escape convey the same underlying terror. The flickering light of her flamethrower briefly illuminates the contrast between man-made machinery and the alien's encroaching influence, reinforcing the film's central tension. The struggle between human civilization and an organism that turns the body into a breeding ground for its own survival. Whether explicitly shown or left to implication, the horror remains the same. Ripley's final act of destruction is not just about escaping, but about reclaiming control from a force that erodes the boundaries between life, death, and something far worse. This imagery reflects a broader fear that dominated the late 20th century anxieties. The fear that humanity might lose control over its own evolution, either through the unchecked spread of technology or through an external force that repurposes life itself. In a time when biotechnology and artificial intelligence were rapidly advancing, Alien visualized a world where flesh and machinery could become one in the most horrifying ways possible. Geiger's design work ensures that Alien's horror is not just about a monster, but about what the monster represents. The terrifying idea that technology, evolution, and biology are not separate forces, but could be fused into something unrecognizable, unstoppable, and deeply unnatural. The xenomorph is not merely a creature, it is a symbol of a future where human bodies, human environments, and even human identity itself might be overtaken, restructured, or rendered obsolete. Upon its release in 1979, Alien received mixed reviews. While many praised its atmosphere and tension, some critics dismissed it as a slow-paced horror film disguised as a science fiction. However, the film's haunting visuals, methodical pacing, and sheer intensity soon led to re-evaluations. Over time, Alien gained recognition as a masterpiece of both horror and science fiction, with its influence becoming undeniable. Alien's impact on both genres is immeasurable. The film redefined sci-fi horror, inspiring films like The Thing and Event Horizon. It also set a new standard for creature design, with H.R. Geiger's Xenomorph influencing monsters in everything from Predator to modern video games like Dead Space and Halo's Flood. Moreover, Alien was a turning point for female protagonists in genre films, paving the way for more complex, strong heroines in science fiction and horror. Whether intentional or not, Alien is a mirror of its time, capturing the distrust in corporations, fear of the unknown, anxieties about gender roles, and the creeping dread of a world losing control. Its influence on both science fiction and horror is immeasurable, and its themes remain as relevant today as they were in 1979. The film's ability to tap into real-world fears and present them in such a visceral, terrifying way is what makes Alien not just a classic, but a timeless piece of cinema.